The Tilden County Courthouse in Alabama hadn't changed much since the 1920s. Its plaster walls were chipped, the wooden benches polished by decades of restless hands, and a lone air conditioning unit rattled louder than the arguments it cooled. This was a place for small-town disputes, fence encroachments, unpaid feed bills, the occasional zoning spat. It was no stage for history, no magnet for headlines. Yet, on a sweltering Thursday morning in June 2025, something ignited in that sleepy courtroom that would blaze across the nation, crash servers, and carve a new chapter in the story of justice. Marcus Freeman, 58, stood at the plaintiff's table, an African-American farmer with a lean build, hands rough from years of turning Alabama's red clay. His Navy work shirt was neatly tucked into khakis, his boots dusted with the soil of his 92-acre farm, where he grew peanuts, sweet potatoes, and tended a modest herd of goats. That land, bought in 1898 by his great-grandfather Ezekiel Freeman, a freedman who defied Jim Crow's chokehold to claim it, was more than dirt, it was a testament. Ezekiel had paid for it with sweat and cunning, dodging predatory lenders and white landowners who saw a black man's deed as an insult. Now, Marcus faced a modern threat, Tilden County, backed by a Virginia-based tech conglomerate, Nexus Data Solutions, aimed to seize his land under eminent domain for a sprawling data center campus. They called it Progress, offered him a six-figure check. Marcus tore it up and mailed the scraps back. They labeled him defiant. He called it honoring his blood. He stood alone, no attorney, just a manila folder and a faded baseball cap on the table. Presiding was Judge Evelyn Caldwell, 50, in a crisp blazer, her voice as sharp as her Yale law degree. A transplant from Connecticut, she ran her courtroom with surgical precision, no tolerance for what she dismissed as rural sob stories. Her reputation was ironclad. Efficient, impartial, but with a knack for cutting through what she saw as emotional clutter. Marcus began his statement, his voice low, resonant with the cadence of Alabama's black belt. Your Honor, I don't talk like no lawyer. That land's been Freeman land since my great-granddaddy scratched it out of nothing. It's fed us through lean years, held us through hard ones. It ain't for no company to pave over for servers. Caldwell's lips twitched. She leaned toward her clerk, letting out a brittle laugh that echoed off the walls. My word, she said, loud enough for all to hear. Am I hearing a legal argument or a sermon from the peanut gallery? The room froze. The bailiff's eyes widened. A young paralegal in the gallery fumbled her notebook. A retired farmer in the back, his face weathered like old leather, gripped his cane tighter. Marcus stood still, his expression unreadable, a man who'd faced worse than a judge's scorn. Slowly, he opened his folder, drew out a single document in a clear plastic sleeve, and approached the podium. Your Honor, he said, his voice steady as stone. Before you laugh again at how I talk, you ought to read what your grandmama signed in 1963. The air turned thick. Caldwell's smirk dissolved. What did you say? She demanded, her tone sharp but unsteady. Marcus placed the paper on the bench. It wasn't a legal filing, not typed or formatted, just a handwritten note, edges yellowed, bearing the faded seal of the Tilden County Voter Registration Office. Read it, Marcus said, his gaze unflinching, carrying the weight of a man who'd come not for sympathy, but for truth. Caldwell, visibly shaken, slipped on her glasses and read aloud, her voice catching. August 3, 1963. To the people of Tilden County. No man or woman shall be denied their voice, whether by ballot or by plow, for the land and the vote are one in dignity. Let none be silenced. Beatrice Caldwell, Registrar. The courtroom became a void. The AC's hum was the only sound. Beatrice Caldwell, Evelyn's grandmother, was a local hero, one of the first white voter registrars in Alabama to register black voters during the Freedom Summer, defying death threats and segregationist mobs. Her signature was etched in county lore, a beacon of courage in a time when black landownership was a rebellion and voting was a risk. Marcus stepped closer. My daddy, Jacob Freeman, was one of the first she registered, he said. He helped her write that note after the Klan left a brick through her window. That's his handwriting in the margin, suggesting by plow. A murmur spread through the gallery. Back then, Marcus continued, they didn't call it mocking a man's speech. They called it trying to erase him. You think my voice don't belong here? Then you're trampling the name you wear. Caldwell sat rigid, her face drained of color. The Nexus attorney, a polished man in a pinstripe suit, tried to pivot. Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the case. But the gallery wasn't listening. An elderly black woman, a retired schoolteacher named Miss Clara, stood in the back, her eyes glistening with pride. Two college students, one filming on a phone, whispered to each other. A local blogger, streaming to X, typed furiously, "Judge just got schooled by a farmer." Marcus faced Caldwell again. "I didn't come to beg or preach. I came to keep what's mine. You laughed at my voice like it's a joke. But it's been speaking in this county longer than your robe's been hanging." The room didn't cheer. It held its breath, heavy with something deeper than anger, recognition. Caldwell recessed the court, her hands trembling as she gathered her papers. But the moment had already escaped her control. By 1 p.m., the blogger's 43-second clip, Caldwell's laugh, Marcus's response, the letter, hit X with the caption, "Judge MOCKS black farmer defending 127-year-old land." It racked up 20,000 reposts in an hour. By dusk, it was on Black Twitter, progressive news sites, and rural justice forums, with comments pouring in, "This is textbook bias. Laugh at his accent, steal his legacy. Her grandmother's rolling in her grave." A viral thread on Reddit's r/justice served read, "She tried to dunk on a farmer and got served his family's history lesson." The backlash was a tidal wave. A petition for Caldwell's recusal hit 300,000 signatures overnight. Black farmers from the Carolinas to Arkansas posted videos with #IStandWithMarcus. A Mississippi woman, holding a toddler and standing in a soybean field, said, "Don't matter if he talks like a preacher or a poet. You don't laugh at a man fighting for his roots." CNN ran a segment, splicing Caldwell's smirk with Marcus's words. The anchor, a Birmingham native, said, "This isn't just about land. It's about whose voice gets respect and whose gets a sneer." Marcus sat in his kitchen, oblivious to the digital storm. No smartphone, no social media, just a radio playing Mahalia Jackson and a cup of black coffee. His wife, Lorraine, 56, stirred collards on the stove, her hair pulled back in a scarf. "I didn't want all this noise," Marcus said, rubbing his forehead. "Just wanted them to leave our dirt alone." Lorraine set a plate of cornbread before him. "They didn't just hear you, Marcus. They felt you. That's bigger than any news truck." The courthouse phones rang off the hook. Caldwell didn't appear Friday. Her chambers stayed dark, her email on auto-reply. She tried to shrink Marcus to a caricature, but he'd held up her own family's legacy like a mirror, and the reflection was brutal. By Saturday, #IStandWithMarcus topped national trends. MSNBC hosted a panel with a land rights lawyer and a civil rights historian, who tied Marcus's fight to the black land loss crisis. Since 1910, black farmers had lost 90% of their farmland to predatory policies and corporate greed. A viral TikTok from a Spelman College student looped Marcus's line, "You're trampling the name you wear," with the caption, "This is why we honor our elders." A late-night comedian quipped, "Judge Caldwell laughed at a farmer's accent in the same county where her grandma fought the Klan. Talk about missing the plot." Marcus wasn't tuned in. He was in the field, checking drip lines, tossing feed to the goats. "Cameras don't plant crops," he grumbled when a news van parked at his gate. But the story grew roots. Scholars scoured Caldwell's rulings, uncovering a pattern. Dismissals of minority-led zoning appeals, expedited approvals for out-of-state developers, subtle barbs in cases involving rural plaintiffs. Marcus's fight became a beacon. A retired surveyor, Mr. Amos, submitted records showing Nexus's land survey had erased an 1898 deed, with boundary lines redrawn using forged signatures. A Montgomery attorney, Aisha Coleman, 38, known for civil rights litigation, contacted Marcus. Over coffee at his farmhouse, she said, "This isn't pro bono for clout. It's about making them prove they can take your birthright. Marcus, skeptical but practical, nodded. No fancy talk, Miss Coleman. Just keep my kids' inheritance where they can walk it. Coleman filed a motion for Caldwell's recusal, citing bias, misconduct, and the 1963 letter, now verified by the Alabama Historical Commission. She included a still of Caldwell's laugh and a transcript of Marcus's testimony. Court was set for Monday, and Tilden County buzzed like a hive. Farmers swapped stories at the feed store. Churchgoers prayed for Marcus at Sunday service. A local barbershop hung a sign, "Freeman land stays Freeman." Monday morning broke humid and tense. A crowd encircled the courthouse. Black farmers in overalls, white neighbors in polos, students with posters reading, "Honor the Voice." News vans lined the square, their satellite dishes like sentinels. Inside, Caldwell entered, her face pale, her usual command frayed. She adjusted her glasses, voice thin. "Court is in session." Marcus sat with Coleman, his shirt ironed, his cap off. The Nexus attorney, sweat beading on his brow, clutched a briefcase like a shield. Coleman stood, her voice clear as a bell. "Your Honor, we move for your recusal based on documented bias, public misconduct, and violation of judicial impartiality." She handed the clerk a thick binder. Exhibit A, your mockery of my client's speech, recorded and witnessed. Exhibit B, Beatrice Caldwell's 1963 letter, entered into public record, contradicting your conduct. Exhibit C, 450,000 signatures demanding a fair hearing. Caldwell bristled. "This court doesn't bow to online mobs," she said. Coleman didn't waver. "Then let it bow to Canon 1 of judicial conduct. A judge must uphold public confidence in the judiciary. You've shattered it." The gallery leaned forward. Marcus rose, unscripted, and looked Caldwell in the eye. "You didn't just laugh at me, ma'am. You laughed at my great-granddaddy's deed, signed when they said a black man couldn't own nothing. You laughed at my daddy's vote, cast when they burned crosses to stop him. You laughed at my mama's prayers, said over a table that land built. You laughed at every black family who held ground when the law was a whip. That ain't justice. That's a disgrace." The room crackled. Reporters scribbled. Miss Clara dabbed her eyes. Caldwell's gavel stayed still. She stood, voice barely a whisper. "I recuse myself." She left the bench, her robe dragging like a fallen flag. The case moved to Judge Naomi Harper, a federal judge from Birmingham, 62, with a reputation for rigor and a deep respect for property law. Known for her rulings in land dispute cases, she had no taste for theatrics, only facts. When court resumed Wednesday, the gallery was packed but calm, the anger replaced by anticipation. Coleman presented a fortress of evidence. The 1898 deed, unbroken tax records, aerial photos showing Freeman crops predating Nexus's existence, and Mr. Amos's testimony exposing the company's doctored maps. The Nexus attorney faltered, his expert witness absent. Judge Harper asked one question: "Does the defense have any evidence that Mr. Freeman's land was legally sold, zoned, or approved for acquisition by public vote?" The attorney's silence was deafening. Harper's ruling was swift. The court affirms Marcus Freeman's sole claim to his 92 acres, voids all seizure attempts, and refers Nexus Data Solutions documentation to the state attorney general for fraud investigation. The gallery stood, not in celebration, but in reverence. Marcus shook Coleman's hand, his face unchanged, and walked out. Outside, reporters clamored. Marcus gave one sentence. "My family kept this land through lynching threats and bank tricks. It's staying ours." He climbed into his truck, and America watched. Not with pity, but with pride. The clip of his testimony hit 120 million views in a week. His words, "You laughed at every black family who held ground when the law was a whip," became a movement. They were printed on T-shirts, quoted in AME church pulpits, stenciled on community center walls. Marcus declined every talk show, every book deal. "I'm a farmer, not a star," he told Lorraine, who just smiled. The nation didn't let go. Legal journals framed Caldwell's fall as a case study in implicit bias and judicial overreach. HBCUs wove the Freeman case into courses on black land ownership and systemic inequity. Rural black communities halted similar land grabs, citing Marcus's precedent. Coleman took on 15 new cases for minority farmers. Her inbox flooded with pleas. The Alabama Bar Association announced a mandatory judicial training overhaul, adding Beatrice Caldwell's 1963 letter to its ethics curriculum, a direct tribute to Marcus's stand. At the farm, Lorraine carved a sign for the road: 5 generations, 1 soil, still ours. Visitors came quietly. Some left jars of honey, others handwritten notes. A Morehouse professor sent a copy of Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, inscribed, "Your voice is our history." A group of 4-H kids planted a pecan sapling near the gate, calling it Freeman's Tree. A year later, a bronze plaque was unveiled outside the courthouse, funded by thousands of small donations. Barbers, nurses, truckers, students. It read, "You didn't just laugh at me. You laughed at every black family who held ground when the law was a whip." Marcus Freeman, 2025. Below, Tilden County Courthouse, where dignity spoke and was answered. Marcus didn't attend. He was planting sweet potatoes, the sun warm on his back. Lorraine brought him a thermos. "You good with this?" she asked. He looked at the land, the red clay rich with memory. "It ain't about me. It's about every hand that worked this dirt and got silenced. They ain't silent no more." He tipped his cap to the horizon, where a flag, stitched from his father's old work shirt and Lorraine's mother's choir robe, flew high. Then he went back to work because the land endures and so does its story. But the ripples didn't stop. In Tilden County, a new generation took notice. A high school civics teacher, Ms. Robinson, showed the courtroom clip to her class. A shy student, Jamal, whose family had lost land in the 80s, raised his hand. Why'd she laugh at him? Was it really just his voice? Ms. Robinson wrote on the board, "Power fears a voice it can't control." That clip went viral too, shared by educators nationwide. The Alabama Department of Education created a module, Voices from the Soil, Land, Race, and Respect. At Tuskegee University, Coleman guest lectured, holding up Marcus's transcript. "This," she said, "is justice rooted in truth, not polish." Caldwell resigned quietly, her statement brief, no apology. But one line stood out. "Some truths are learned not in robes, but in the silence of those who stand." She faded from public life. Marcus didn't. He fixed fences, tended crops, and let the country remember. Respect isn't worn, it's earned. One evening, as fall cooled the air, he and Lorraine sat under the pecan tree, the flag snapping in the breeze. A letter arrived from a Chicago teacher, enclosing a drawing by her students. Marcus in his boots, holding a deed with the words, "We heard you." Marcus folded it carefully. "That's enough," he said, and it was.